Yeah. Oh, can you fill me in? Let's talk about it.
We are recording. We are going. How are you both doing?
Good,
Thanks. Yeah.
So we've got Jem Wave, and we've got Si Wave.
Hey.
So we're going to be talking a little bit today, not just about addiction, but about recovery, about sort of the way we think, the way we act, the difference between the two. So how long have you both been in recovery?
For me, I've been recovering from heroin. This was 16th year, I think, and alcohol. Just into my second year recovery, first year recovery. So I think I'm about 15, 16 months or something now.
Alcohol. It will be August the 6th. It'll be 17 years now. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Wow. So mine's August the 8th, and it'll be 7. So I'll get my 7th little line on. Well, if we're allowed to play out and if we're allowed to get tattoos in August, I'll definitely be going to get my my 7th little line. How are you coping with this being locked down?
I was all right at first. I found it fairly easy because, spent a lot of time on my own anyway, so it wasn't that big a deal at first. But last couple of weeks, it's really started to get to me because they enforced being sat in most of the day. It's just, it's got to me a bit last couple of weeks.
I'm very lucky in the sense that I thought it gets me more than it has, but I'm very lucky in the sense that I've still been working full time. I've been working from home. I've had quite a lot of structure to my days. All it's done for me is it's taken out 2 hours commuting a day, which has been welcome. Yeah. I think I must have been a bit hyper at first because I wrote, I think, 4 articles and 6 poems in about 3 weeks. So I was definitely, I think, reacting to the confinement. Since then, I've pretty much settled down. I do find the odd day I just get up in the morning and just feel, don't feel like doing much. But because, I sort of regulate my own days, those days you don't do much. You do you do what you have to, and that's it.
Yeah, well, I spent the first 2 weeks of lockdown unable to walk, so I got something called plantar fasciitis, and it's because I ride the bike. I've got motorbike gear that looks like I'm just wearing jeans and trainers, but the motorbike boots don't really support your feet, so the arch of my foot wasn't getting supported. And then just over time, it's just gone. And I literally could not put my feet on the floor. It was awful. And then I started with like a virus. I don't know if it was the virus, but I had a virus. And it just had a really weird reaction in my body. Like my body didn't know how to deal with both of them at the same time. So I had like bruising all up my shins. But it came to a point, if you imagine having socks on and getting a suntan, that's what it looked like. Like my legs were normal to literally a circle, and then it was just bruised up until that point. It was really, really weird.
Yeah.
So for the first 2 weeks, I couldn't do anything anyway. So I was just sort of taking it as I just need to rest. As soon as I was up and walking, that was it. I was just restless. I need to do something. So me and the way my head works, I was out looking for projects and work and sort of all sorts of things to do. So it's that sort of, I need stuff going on because I can't focus, I can't concentrate. I don't know if I've ever told you both. I usually mention it when I'm on stage if I've got a new spoken word piece that I'm reading. So I can't read because I can't focus on one thing at a time. So while I'm reading, I'm sort of, don't forget you need to ring. Oh, that person rung and you didn't call them back. You've got that mail, you've got these emails. And all the time I'm just reading this thing, but all these things are going off in my head. And I've tried meditation and I just sat with my eyes closed thinking, you're not meant to be thinking about anything. Stop thinking about not thinking about anything. It was awful. And I just found myself getting more and more frustrated. So I've got my own way of dealing with things. And somebody once asked me if I could change it, would I? And I just think life experience would not have achieved anywhere near as much as what we have if I could do one thing at a time, because I would have just done one thing at a time. But because we've got sort of all these different things going on, we've been quite successful, which has massively helped. Are either of you two similar?
I was going to say, go on, sorry.
God, sorry. My brain's very simple. Phil, we spoke about that before. I struggle to concentrate on anything, really. So, but at the beginning of lockdown, I just like Jem had said, like, I was writing so much poetry all the time, it was flowing. And then now I'm just sort of, my brain's sort of gone, and I can't create anything at the moment, but my brain's still racing. So that's why I haven't slept. Been awake half a night, trying to think of something to switch my brain off. So I get a bit like that all the time.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think we all are. If we all went to school today, I've no doubt that we'd all be classed as ADHD, because I certainly would. I was the naughty boy in class. I couldn't keep quiet. They always used to say rather be a class clown than a class scholar. And I know my mind was constantly working. And like that you say, you know, I burnt myself out and written out at the moment. But even so, we're walking the dog and I'll get a couplet in my brain. When I get home, I'll have half a poem in my brain and I'll get it down. And that's the way my mind works. When I'm listening to someone else, I'm not a very good listener to other people's poetry generally, because while they're talking, I'm thinking. So I'd rather write than listen.
So what about, so you're both in very different relationships. Jem, you're sort of more long-term. Si, you're quite new in your relationship, aren't you? Are your partners in recovery?
Mine isn't. No, she's not really. She never really had a problem with drink or drugs.
So how does she understand sort of what's going on, and is she cool with that? Or?
Yeah, she's very understanding of it. But there's a lot of times I'll say stuff and she says you say it just, you know, about addiction and some crazy times. It's like you just say it so matter of fact, as though it's just like just walking to a shop or blah blah blah. To her, I don't know, it might be like quite shocking or but maybe upsetting even, you know. But
we're desensitized to certain stuff that we've obviously been through.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. My wife's a normie, but she's known me. She's known me for 40 years now. So she's known me as a drinker. I don't think she's seen the worst of me as a drinker, but her previous husband was a guy who had real problems with drink, in the sense that he drank a lot and got quite nasty with it. I don't think I ever got that way, but because that caused quite a few problems, her family freaked out a bit when they found out I was in recovery, particularly when they saw me drinking Beck's Blue, for example. But Carolyn can just have one or two glasses of wine, and I've never ever seen her drunk, never seen her affected by alcohol, so it doesn't even register these days. She's got a glass in her hand, it could be anything. I don't even clock it. So we have a completely normal life in that respect. She drinks, I don't. And I've never had that issue with people in public where people have made a fuss about me not drinking. It's just never been on the radar at all.
I mean, I've had a couple of relationships since I came home from prison in 2014. Some would drink, not drinkers as in alcoholics, but some would go out on a weekend and have a drink. Some wouldn't. And it's weird because it's sort of, you know that they like a glass of wine, but then when you're with them, if we go out for food, it's like, oh, do you mind if I have a drink?
Yeah.
And he's just like, no, I don't mind at all. I'd be more annoyed if you didn't have a drink because you thought it would bother me. But when I first came home, because of how mad my life was before, we would go to a pub, and I was quite lucky because my recovery was very sort of intense. So one of the things that I'll never forget, I was in a little room with my drug worker, my sister and my mum, in this tiny little interview type room. And I had to pre-write 10 questions, and it had to be about their feelings and my actions. How did it feel for you when the house got raided? You know, what was going through your head when I came home that day, and gave specific examples of times when I come in and collapsed and stuff in front of my nephews and stuff that sort of bring a lot of shame that you try not to talk about. And we just got it all out, and it was one of the best things I mean, it was awful at the time, don't get me wrong. It was absolutely awful. All 4 of us just sat crying in this room. But it's sort of, if I was ever to use drugs again, it's like, sorry, Mum, I know exactly how you feel because you told me in great detail, but I'm still going to do it anyway. It's just ruined drug use for me. So when I was getting home leaves, I purposely went into pubs and drunk pop so that when I was released from prison, where I wasn't going to get breath tested on my way anywhere, it was normal for me to go in and drink pop.
That was your new habit.
Yeah, so I needed to test myself. I needed to make sure that I could go to a wedding and be okay. I could go to a birthday party. I could still do the things that I was doing before, but just without alcohol and drugs. So I'd go into pubs, and not through any sort of them trying to make me fail or anything like that, but some of my mates would just be like, just have a pint, we'll look after you, we'll make sure you don't use any drugs. Or, you're going to have one eventually, you might as well have it with us while we know you're safe. And it's that sort of not understanding addiction, I guess, really, to understand why it is that we don't drink. Even, like, for me, drink was never a problem, but a few pints in, someone sniffing in a toilet cubicle, I'm more likely to sort of, give them a little knock.
It's a massive disinhibitor, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose, in a sense, my early sobriety was a bit like a prison sentence. I deliberately didn't. I went out once in 6 months, I think, and that was to a wedding which I actually couldn't dodge, and it felt really, really weird. And I deliberately avoided any sort of wet situations. But eventually, like you say, it's life on life's terms, isn't it? You've got to go out and do it, and you're surrounded by booze whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
we have to live with it.
So. I think for me, I kind of put myself in situations that I'd probably advise against in recovery. But for me, it's kind of like, if I'm gonna mess up, I'm gonna mess up at the beginning, not 6 months down the line. So I wanted to know that I had the strength to be in a pub and not want alcohol, which would probably people would advise you against that, but it's horses for courses. I need to know that I have that personal strength to keep me safe, and I do, I still do, but and it never really bothered me. I think once I stopped drinking alcohol this time and I realised that why I was drinking, I just couldn't fool myself anymore. About the
what do you mean? What did you realise? When you say you realised why you were drinking?
Yeah.
Why was you drinking? What did you realise?
I wanted to whatever I did, alcohol or drugs, it was to mess myself up. I thought it was for comfort and have a good time. But it was kind of the opposite in the end, I think.
Like a self-sabotage type?
Yeah, like a very self-destructive pattern I were on. You just drink yourself into a hole and just keep going. But once I stopped, I needed, like when I come off alcohol withdrawal, I did it with 17 bottles of beer in a case at the side of my sofa. And my CPN and my friends were all like, just throw them away. But I thought, if I'm going to be tempted, I'm going to be tempted out, no matter what, whether they're there or not. So, but that worked for me, doing it that way.
So you did what? You just left the beer in your house as a way to say...
Yeah, the beer, I left it right. I was like, literally, you can't, when you're coming off alcohol, the withdrawals are so horrendous, you literally can't walk. So I was curled up on a ball on the sofa with a box of bottles of beer across the room from me. But I just left them there as a test, which everybody were advising me against it, but I think that's what worked best for me, knowing that at any minute I could just grab a beer and make myself feel better, but I'd have to go through those withdrawals again at some point. So it was just easier to have them there, know that I could go through my withdrawal and not be tempted. And once I had gone through the withdrawal and wasn't tempted, I kind of knew in the back of my mind, but without being complacent or thinking I was being arrogant or cocky about it, I just knew that something in my head had kind of changed. I didn't want alcohol anymore.
Yeah.
The drug worker, she was called Barbara. I'll never forget her. I'd say she still is called Barbara. Definitely still called Barbara. She was amazing, and lots of people say, what do you know? You've never been through addiction. She wasn't an addict, but she'd studied it for that long, and I tell you what, she's probably into treble figures with the amount of lives that she's saved. But she always used to say, if you sit in a barber's chair for too long, you'll get your hair cut.
Yeah.
One of the good things about the way my head works is I'm very competitive. And I remember once them saying, when you've got 10 people in a room of recovery, 3 of them people are going to die because of drugs. Another 5 of those people are going to relapse. So you've one of 2 people in every 10 that are going to survive. And it's sort of like, it made it a competition for me. It's like, right, well, I'm definitely not going to be one of them 3. I'm not going to be one of them 5, which means my only choice is to make sure I'm one of them 2. And it wasn't said in a way to make it competitive. It was just sort of like it was meant to be like a wow factor type statistic. But in my head, I was just like, right, that's it. I'm going to make sure I'm one of them 2, and I'm not going to be that statistic. It's just absolutely crazy how, little bits of information just get flipped around and sort of used to my advantage, if that makes sense.
I think what Si said chimes with me. I'm a stubborn bastard. And once I made my mind up, I think they call it the gift of desperation. Once I'd said to myself, can't do this anymore, that was all I needed to say. And I remember going in to see my CPN, and she said that one of the first things she said was, what do you want from this? Do you want to moderate, or do you want to stop? And I always wonder what would happen. I think if I'd said moderate, she'd throw me out of the office. But again, she wasn't an addict, but she was just such a woman I admired so much. And she said, do you want to moderate or do you want to stop? And I just looked at her and said, I'd never been a moderator, and nothing's changed. So now I have to stop. And she went, right, let's do it. And that was it, that I knew as clear as anything that I could never moderate. It's just not in my dictionary.
Yeah.
I had to stop. And once I had that recognition that I had to stop, I went ahead and did it. Yeah. It was tough, but actually not that tough. Cigarettes was harder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the first conversation I had with mine, so I got moved to a prison in Preston, HMP Kirkham, and when you get put on like an induction wing, and I went to the library. You have to go around everywhere and register. I've walked into the library and I'm sort of explaining I've just arrived and I want to register and all this, and I can hear somebody talking, and I just thought, I'm sure that's him. So I've walked around the corner, and the guy who I was in Armley with was there. We called him Spanish. I don't think that he was called Glenn. I don't know why we called him Spanish, but that was his name. And he was very English, very, very English. And he was like, oh, I'm on the recovery side. If you lie and say you're an addict, you get your own toilet, your own shower, everything in one room, like single rooms. So I was like, oh, that sounds ace. So I went to prison with sort of no responsibility of me being an addict, no thought process, absolutely nothing in my mind told me I was an addict. And then I'm on this wing, and then we have to go to meetings, and I went to my first NA meeting, and at the end there was a guy who I'm still in touch with, and he'd had these 2 fingers removed, so he just had them 3 fingers left on his hand, and he had an open wound on his arm at one point, and he was trying to inject into his open wound. So some of the stories that I heard and some of the situations he was in, but it all stemmed from his childhood, from being from a very strict Catholic family, and being allowed to drink alcohol at a very young age with meals and stuff. And then because of how his head is similar to ours, he took that to the next level and the next level, and the punishments at home were brutal, and that made him sort of leave the home. And I was sat there thinking, wow, I only sniffed a bit of coke. What am I doing sat here? And then everyone got up and everyone hugged, which made me feel really uncomfortable. So I left and I didn't go back. And I bumped into him walking around doing laps of the prison. And he said, how come you've not been back? So I explained to him. And he just said, it's got nothing to do with how you started or what the journey was. It's where you've ended up. And I'll never forget that. And the woman, Barbara, she called me in and she was like, so why are you wanting to move? Why have you not been back to NA? And I told her, and she was like, well, tell me your story. And when I started mentioning sort of spending £300 to £400 a day on coke, not being able to get out of bed on a morning unless I'd had a line, and started going through all these things, she was like, are you fucking kidding me? Listen to what, does that sound like a normal life? Are any of your siblings, do your sisters live like that? I was like, no. She's like, so what are you saying? You don't need to be here. And she sat me down and she spelled it out, and I was just like, it all makes sense. She knew me better than I did at that time.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's frightening, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
I can't get my head around the fact that you're in prison for drugs offences and you say you've not got a problem. What's your problem? Getting caught, you know?
Really bad at it. Yeah.
Just brilliant. Yeah.
My issue was I always had it, so I never really went without. I never had that sort of, I need to get some. There were certain drugs that you'd feel like that for, but it were more, you'd put yourself in a situation. So you go to a certain friend's house where you use ketamine, for example, and you sat there and you haven't got any. So you're just like, right, I want some because that's what happens here. You know, it's like going to a five-a-side court and you get there early and you're waiting for the guy with the ball.
Yeah.
You're like, well, there's no point me being here until the ball comes. So, and you just get really impatient and you know, time seems to go slower. And it was just very much like that. So I never really knew what it felt like to go without. And then when you go to prison, because I don't smoke, I never really used recreational drugs in prison because everything that you can get in there is stuff that you'd smoke. And you go there not expecting to get coke or ketamine. So it's not like I can get it, but I can't get it at this moment, so I want some. You just sort of switch off to it.
Yes, yeah.
You can't have it there. It's not,
the option's not there.
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had absolutely no clue. And then she's saying all these things. And it's like, when you were little, did you ever do things like this? I was like, yeah, I did. And it was like, did you collect pointless stuff? And I remember Coca-Cola started doing glass bottles.
Yeah.
Buy a glass bottle of Coke and then keep them. And my unit in my bedroom was just full of empty glass Coke bottles. Like, why? It's not. I want recycling. I don't why I'm collecting them.
That sort of obsessional mindset. Yeah. It's funny. I've been reading a lot at the moment. I don't know if you've heard of In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts.
Yeah.
Gabor Mate is basically he's a doctor that treats heroin, well, Class A addicts in Canada, and he talks about the impact of adverse childhood experiences and trauma on addicts, and saying that he's never met an addict who hasn't had some degree of adverse childhood experiences, and the worse they've been, the more chance there is of becoming an addict. And that, you're just describing that guy before. Yeah. That's a classic example. And it's even things like, you know, your parents divorcing and stuff are classed as an adverse childhood experience. But the people I see all the time, that the backstories are horrendous, you know, and I actually feel quite guilty for ending up with a problem when I feel like a bloody dilettante, because, you know, my childhood, by comparison, you know, everyone has problems, but it was a normal middle class background, you know, and never wanted for a meal. There was a lot of stuff going on, but nothing comparable at all. I actually feel quite guilty. They ended up, you know, partying too hard, but I know it went deeper than that.
Yeah, I know when I was in rehab, obviously part of rehab is you read your life story out to the community there once you've been in a while. And same thing, once you start hearing other people's life stories. So I went in a rehab like withdrawing from heroin and feeling sorry for myself. And life had screwed me, and then I got in there. You start to get a bit better. You start to listen to people's life stories, and the one thing that was the first time it really opened my eyes to how much childhood trauma played a part in addiction, because literally everybody's life story had some form of abuse, whether it be like sexual, physical, or like mental neglect. But there were a lot of same thing. You hear somebody's life story and then you think, Jesus, what the hell? You know, what am I whining about?
Yeah.
What am I trying to run away from? You know, if I had their ghost, maybe I'd have something to worry about. But so yeah, you do feel. I think it's easy to feel guilty about it, but it don't matter what you've been through, is it? Like we said before, it's the end result.
Where it gets you, yeah.
All roads lead to Rome, really, isn't it? So.
Yeah, the ACEs thing, I didn't like the idea of ACEs. I mean, the name is ridiculous to start with, but I had a real problem with them at first, because if you take the test for yourself, it pretty much says you're buggered, you've got no chance in life. But But if you're a professional looking at someone's life, I understand now the need for that understanding. So I'm doing some work with the police, and we're going to be looking at each individual part of the ACEs and looking at how each individual one has an impact on someone's childhood and then how that affects them later in life. And I think there's a lot of learning to be done with stuff like that. I don't think...
What are those, Phil?
So it's adverse childhood experiences. So if you look it up, if I was clever, I could bring it up on the screen and then share it with you both. But I'm not even going to try and push my luck. Everything seems to be going okay. It says recording up in that corner. It says 56 minutes up in that corner. So I'm happy. I know that this is going to produce them at the end. I don't want to start messing with stuff.
Yeah, you do right.
But if you look up, so it offers you some questions. I can't remember how many questions there are, but it's sort of, did you ever feel that you was unloved as a child growing up? Did you, are your parents divorced? Was there ever domestic abuse within your household? Something to do with
like a scaling exercise, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and the more yeses, it sort of tallies up a score basically, and then it shows what sort of level of support you potentially need as an adult. So again, from a professional working with people, I understand 100% how useful a tool like that is. But if you look on there yourself and put your own answers in, it can make you feel like what's the point? And that's the impression I've got from a few people.
The other thing is, I remember looking up. I found something. It was 5 precursors, if you like, for a problem with alcohol, and I always remember 4 but never 5, but essentially it was like, someone in your family, genetic predisposition, had a problem with alcohol. My mum. Drinking at an early age, starting to drink at an early age, started at 11. Spending time with people who also like to drink, did that. Drinking to get drunk really from the very start. And I can't remember what the 5th one is, but I basically ticked 5 out of 5, and I was like, yeah, it was always going to happen, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember that my first drink to this day, 11 years old, it was like the sun coming out, and I was like, yes, this does it for me. And it just took the edge off things for me, just calmed me enough that all of a sudden I wouldn't say anxious, I'm not showing you what anxiety was, but it just sort of grounded me.
Right.
Made me feel like, this is okay, this. Whereas before, I certainly didn't feel like I fitted in. I think it helped me fit in. And because I was the guy, to be blunt, that nicked the cider, I was a popular guy,
It was a confidence thing then.
I used to sneak into this garage, and there's a bottling plant in Nantwich where we lived on the way home from primary school, and lift a couple of bottles and get out and we'd drink it on the park. And I was the man, for doing that. But at the same time, it wasn't a confidence thing as such as it was. It made me feel like, this is okay.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can put it, really.
Yeah, the guy who did the share in the prison, they had a wine cellar, and he used to pinch bottles of wine and take them to primary school, and then didn't understand why other kids didn't want to drink it. And he was that one that sort of like, oh, do you want some of this? And I don't know if it was a way to get them to accept him or for his behaviour to be okay because other people are doing it, or if he was just wanting to share. But when the other kids were saying no, that's when it started to sort of, for him to realise that. Maybe.
I think that's where the genetic thing comes in, because there's apparently a gene which I think it's called acetylide or something like that. There's a certain enzyme which makes people feel quite unpleasant when they drink. And it's the same as you get with anti-abuse. You get that flushed feeling and a headachy feeling. And most people after 2 or 3 drinks will start to actually feel a bit sort of not well. They get that disulfiram effect. I don't, and never have, and I've always loved it. I know now that on a physiological level, some people just don't react well with it. But I've always been good at it. It's always been like second nature to me. And that is a genetic thing, I'm sure. I'm missing a bit of my code that makes it unpleasant to drink too much. So
do you think there's stuff that you're doing in life now that you wouldn't have done while you were drinking? And obviously I'm leaning towards the spoken word thing because all 3 of us have that in common. But is there other things that that you're potentially doing now that you wouldn't have ever done, or?
Go on, Si.
Having a baby.
Yeah, good one.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done that if I was still drinking, I don't think. But I don't know. But poetry's kind of filled up a massive void for me with stopping drinking. So it has become a big part of me not drinking. So I concentrate a lot on that more than anything else. I used to be really into photography, which I'm going to start dusting my cameras off again and getting back in.
You're good at it, yeah, you are.
But I don't know, I think it's more, since I started drinking, poetry's given me everything that I really needed. It's the best therapy I've found, writing stuff down, and then I'll get to work on my anxiety and being around people in general by getting up and performing. And then I get a buzz out of it, which is a reward at the end of it. So
yeah.
I don't really have time. And like Phil says, his head's off on tangents. Mine's like that, but it also can be on like a million different tangents, but they'll all be poetry ones, if you know what I mean. But just poetry really is the main thing.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing because I just flashing back to remembering you, saying that you look so confident doing your stuff now, but I remember the first time when you were visibly shaking. I'm not sure you are reminded of that or not, but yeah.
Was that in Keighley? Was I at that one?
You were at that one, yeah. It was at Riri's, of course. But
yeah, first time we met Phil. But I'll tell you what, when we did the online thing with Toria and Kirsty the other week, I was more nervous doing that. That was like performing in public for the first time.
Yes, I
doing it on the Zoom thing, because it all kind of ties in with mental health. There's webcams and things like that, problems that I have with mental health. So I had to kind of push myself to do it online. But that were really, I found it really nerve wracking. It was kind
weird, isn't it?
And then I started worrying then, because I've been sat in the house for so long now. When we go back out and I start going to perform, I'm going to have to go through all that first time nerves all over again and back to shaking and can't read.
No, I don't think so. I can't
I
see
think
that.
the difference is when you're on stage, you feel pressure, but in a good way, like you want to perform. But then when you're at home, it's a bit more relaxed and it don't feel as real. And the other thing is, how weird is it when you finish and no one claps?
Yes. You don't get the warmth coming back, do you?
Yeah, and then you just go like, so this next one is...
yeah, absolutely.
The most awkward. Like people are sat there going like this, but you can't hear them.
Yeah. The strange thing is for me, though, is that I've said this today before, because I did a podcast earlier on today, and when I was drinking, there wasn't enough booze in the world to get me to do karaoke or something like that. There's just no way I would do that. I wouldn't stand up in front of people and talk. But I think the poetry scene, the spoken word scene, I've always loved it, and it's an activity we can get involved in which doesn't revolve around booze. It's all about the camaraderie. And the words, and spending time with like-minded people who bond over something other than a shared interest in alcohol. And it's just good fun. You stand up there. There's nothing stressful about it nowadays, because all you're doing is talking to friends.
Yeah.
And I love it. Absolutely love it. And it's, as Simon's just referred to, really, it's just given me so much more confidence. I mean, people would have said before that they didn't think I suffered a lack of confidence, but that's just an impression people take away. It's not necessarily the real me. Now I am genuinely pretty confident. I wasn't before.
Oh wow! See, I'm weird. So if I'm going to perform somewhere, I'll go on my motorbike, and if I'm doing 3, if I'm doing 5, whatever I'm doing, I'll do all of them on the bike on the way there.
Yeah. And
then I try not to think about it when I'm there, because I want to try and focus as much as I can on what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, I'll just be sat with the words going around in my head. And then someone will interrupt me. And this has happened before. I'll be doing it, and then someone will ask me something, and I'll be like, oh, where was that? And then I forget that poem when I'm performing, because I've not completed it in my head.
Gotcha.
And the couple of times where I've forgotten words while I'm on the bike on my way there, I've forgotten the words while I'm performing.
Right.
So I need to, if I nail it before I perform, I'll go on with this confidence that it's there and I know it and it's going to come out. But then it's that's good. But then the opposite is, well, I know it, but I just got the words wrong that once. But now I've got it in my head because I got it wrong practicing. I'm going to get it wrong on stage. And because I'm saying that, I do. So
see, I can do 3 or 4 John Cooper Clarke poems from memory even now, but I can't remember my own stuff. I remember once I did one for the Iftar a couple of years ago, the one I do about, it's called Hope. And I literally did that for 2 weeks walking the dog. It was word perfect. Got up there. I still had my words in front of me because I thought I need this safety net. Got up there, blanked, did it from the sheet. Right. I did it more fluently because I knew the words better, but I could nowhere have done the whole thing from memory. It's something about it that trips out.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
You know, the competitive side to my head. So the first time I ever went to watch it was in Wakefield at the Red Shed. So that would have been 2017, October 2017. I think that works out to be the right maths. And it was after meeting Simon Widdop in Morley. And I went and I watched, and Toria Garbutt performed, and Claire Crossdale was there, and Ian and Bad Company, and Simon Widdop. And I was just like, wow, these guys.
Yeah.
They all got up and they all performed. Claire referenced words, but the way Claire performs, you know, there's just the talent. And I was just like, if I want to do this, I need to be as good as them. And the way to be as good as them is to memorize it. So the first thing I wrote was about cancer, and I wrote it laid on the sofa watching TV. It was Stand Up for Cancer in November. Crystal Maze, and I just started writing a note in my phone about how cancer's affected our family. And then I memorised it, and I got it in my head, and I went to Wakefield to perform it, and I did a workshop with Ralph Dartford. Simon Widdop was there again, a woman called Joy, and we went upstairs into this empty room, and it was a massive hall, and there was like a little booth, like you'd get in like a bar. And we were just sitting there, and there was a mic stand with no mic, and they said, right, get up and tell us your poem. So I've got up and I've walked over, and I've turned around, and I see this mic stand, and I see 3 people there, and I went, I fucking hate you, cancer. Oh, it's gone. I got the first line. The first line is all I got. And then I was just like, I'll get it. And then I got the first sort of 4 lines, and then it had gone, and I could feel myself getting more and more nervous the more that they were looking at me while I was trying to remember my lines. So there was a 2-hour break in between the workshop and the performance. So I sat and I wrote it out first time, no problems. And then I had it with me. But in the video, I am sort of looking at it more than I'm not looking at it. And it really annoyed me. But when you know now that I can't focus on one thing at a time, every time I learnt my words, I'd learn them sort of here at home, not a problem, get on stage and my head would be, oh, look over there, you need to, you know, that bit where you do that thing with your hand, whichever one of the ones it is, you know, the sort of active bits. My head will be telling me about them rather than what to say. And I forgot words constantly. I remember doing it in Halifax.
I think it's called state learning, that, isn't it? Yeah. You have to sort of replicate the...
Yeah. Well, what I've learned to do is to put music on. So I listen to hip-hop music from like Dr. Dre 2001, stuff like that, because I know the words to the songs. So while the words to the songs are trying to get me to sing along, I just recite the words to the poems. So now when I get on stage, I have no control over what I remember or what I don't remember. I get up, I say the first line, and then we just see what happens. But the one I did in Holbeck, that was written specifically to perform once, and it's 4 minutes long, and I had a month, and it just wasn't going in, and it wasn't going in, and then it started to, and then it was a little bit, and I got up, and I was the most nervous I think I've ever been, because getting up for the first time, people know it's your first time. Getting up after 2.5, close to 3 years, you have expectations of you, and then if I was to mess up on this, in this room of sort of 300 people performing this first piece for the first time to a live audience, never to perform it again, it was just all these things of added pressure. And I messed up 2 words, but luckily no one realised.
But do you know what? Having watched, obviously, people like John Cooper Clarke and Kate Tempest and listening to their recordings, they, you know, because I'm a bit of a pedant like that, I'll pick up things. I know that Kate Tempest, for example, missed out a couple of words and changed a couple of lines in that gig we saw.
Oh, right.
John Cooper Clarke, there's as many versions of some of his poems as there are performances. You know, it'll tweak them and change them, and you'll get different versions on different nights. He does change different words, and I think it's easy that if you write stuff that doesn't necessarily scan perfectly or rhyme perfectly, that's okay. But my stuff, I always try and get to scan and rhyme perfectly. So if I miss out a word, the job's knackered. Basically, I can't do it. Whereas, you know, Kate Tempest, for example, it's more of a narrative, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so what I got wrong, I've just said the wrong word. So there was still a word there, but it wasn't a rhyming word or anything. It was just leading up to the rhyme. So I got away with it. Only me and one other person knew that I'd heard it before. But no one else in the room had ever heard it. So they didn't have a clue that that was a thing. So I was quite lucky and quite lucky. So what's your confidence like now, Si? Can you just...
I don't know, I'm still nervous as hell every time I get up.
Right.
But because I know there's a buzz coming at the end of it now, and I do get a genuine high off it performing.
And does it matter to you who's in the room?
You are?
Does it matter to you who's in the room? Does it get worse if there's certain people there, or...? No,
I think it's more to do for personal, for my own thing, you know. If I'm happy with how I've got it across, and I've no answer, like what you're saying about if you miss a word or you put the wrong word in there, and only you know, no one else in that room has a clue, and they haven't even noticed that you made the slightest mistake, but inside, in my head, I'm like,
the next couple of lines, you're just like, I can't believe I did that.
Nobody's even noticed it.
Yeah.
But when loads of people say to me that when I get up, Kevin Fart, his wife, Jill, she comes to me and I like you. You get up and you just look like you don't give a fuck. Further from truth, but loads of people said to me like, you know, you seem confident and like you're just really confident doing it and at home doing it, and it's like I'm absolutely shitting myself all the time up there. I'm terrified, but the buzz that I get, it's worth it.
It gives you the edge, though, doesn't it? That
the confidence is getting better, but it's something that I know that I also need to work on. Like Phil said something earlier about if you having to read it, you can't perform it as well. Because you haven't, you know, as soon as you start moving them out, well, where's the words gone? They're over. So I would like to be able to memorise them more, but that I really, really struggle on. And again, it's my confidence that stops me having a go at it more. Some of my poems that I've got memorised perfectly, but...
but some of yours, you have so many words and you go at such a speed.
I find if when I try and do it slower, for other, you know, I just try and slow the speed that I'm delivering it at, so it's not kind of machine gunning. I really struggle to keep my brain, to slow my brain down. So it's like if I'm reading an autocue, my brain's already over here and autocue's back here somewhere.
But you don't need to slow down in the sense that we can understand everything you're saying. Like you deliver fast, but it's precise. Like I've said, in my experience, you have, for me, and this in sort of a dig at anyone that does it any other way, my sort of understanding is there's 3 stages to performing. And the first one is, it's on paper and I'm going to read it and I'm just going to emphasize what I can, but I'm focusing on what this says. The second stage is it's in my head and I'm probably going to look up a lot because I'm trying to remember the words, and the most important thing is I get the words right. And then the third stage is it's in there, I'm putting pauses in, I'm emphasizing words, I'm using my hands, and it's more of a performance. Those sort of
I've not got to that level yet. I really haven't.
That's what I want to work on more, like with the confidence thing, because it's my own self-doubt that stops me doing it. In my head, all I'm hearing is like what I think my mates would be saying, you know what I mean? Oh my God, look at him, look at that dick up there doing that. And that's how I kind of talk. That's the negative talk that I have with myself when I'm doing stuff like that. And at first, when I used to watch some poets who really perform the pieces, I used to kind of be a bit like, oh yeah, it's just all performance and no poetry. But when I thought about it, it's because I was so jealous that I couldn't do what they're, that I didn't have the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
Really perform it and put emphasis into it. And it's because I've never done all that. I never did all that at school. I didn't do drama or anything like that at school.
Oh yeah, I would never have done anything like this before. And it took me, well, it was only a few years ago that I started, but I dreamt up a poem in prison about Spice, and that's how I started. It must have been like mid 2014. And then I didn't do anything for a few years. And that must have been what made me think I'm going to go see Simon Widdop, because I was working for Leeds City Council, and they have an internal internet, just where they all post all like events that are happening. So they call it the intranet. And there was something about this punk poet in Morley who's got a typewriter. You tell them about yourself and they'll write you a poem. Or if someone's leaving work, tell them about that person and he'll write them a poem. Or so I was like, oh, I just fancy. And I can't remember where I was. I was doing something and I had the motorbike and I was just like, I'm gonna leave this early and go and meet this guy.
And that was Simon, was it?
It was Simon Widdop, yeah.
Right.
I don't know how. It must have been because it was through Morley Town Hall.
Yeah.
It must have been something to do with one of the literature festivals.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the dreaming of this poem in prison that must have made me think, oh, I want to go see this guy and see what he's doing. And then that thought...
That Pip. Yeah, funny if it was Martin Webster that got me going. He knew into the bit, and we've always had this common sense of humour, as you know. And he invited me to one in. I think my first one was actually with him, but it wasn't a roaring success, and it's not something I would have done again. But after that, I got involved with the Batley Poets, and it sort of carried on from there.
So what's more nerve-wracking for you, poetry or stand-up comedy?
It's different in the sense that obviously you don't take your words on with a stand-up thing, but the guy who did our training, we did 8 weeks of training for that first stand-up gig. He said that you could tell that I did spoken word. He said because there's such precision in your writing, right. You know. I always go back to like Steely Dan used to say. You rehearse and you rehearse and you rehearse until you got it technically perfect. Then you rehearse and rehearse a bit more till it sounds natural. Right. So although I know exactly the words that I'm going to say, I've done it so many times I deliver them conversationally. Yeah. But because there doesn't have to be that rhyming structure, and you don't have to get every word in the right place, but it's still quite a precise little piece. It takes that pressure away. But as I say, the guy that trained us said, you know, I can tell you're a poet. He said, because of the way you write. There's not a word wasted. It's very tight. So it helps. One informs the other is the quick answer, I think, really.
For me, I don't think I could do stand-up because I feel like I can be funny responsively. So if someone will say something, I feel like I can be quick with a response.
Yeah.
But even... If you write a rubbish poetry piece, you get up and you perform it, everyone claps anyway because it's a respectful thing to do.
Yeah.
If you get up and tell a shit joke, everyone's just going to look at you and think, I'm not laughing at that. So you could quite happily get up and do a rubbish poetry set and still feel like it went ace.
Yeah, well... But it's funny. I don't tell jokes for one thing. I don't. Mine's narrative stuff. It's sort of storytelling, and I take the piss out myself, and that's always going to be funny, isn't it? You know, obliquely, I take the piss out myself. Yeah. And the other thing is, the only time I've really died on my arse, and it was that, you know, the 12-hour spoken word job in Leeds. I've done that twice. And Si was with me then, and I absolutely died on my arse. And the reason I did was because the two people who went on before me, I thought, shit, he's better than me. And I went on there with that in my head. And if you go on to do stand-up and the thought isn't in your head that this is the funniest shit you're going to hear today, you'll bomb. Yeah. And I went on apologetically and didn't know what I was going to be doing. And there was I hadn't convinced myself, so I wasn't going to convince anybody else I was funny. But that's the only time it's ever happened. Every other time I've gone on there and it's like, do you know what? This is really funny. Yeah, and it might sound arrogant. It's not. It's just it's a discipline, if you like. You've got to believe it's good.
Si messaged me and told me about that time in Leeds.
I'm not surprised. No. But you move on. I mean, I remember coming off, a guy actually barracked me on the way out the door. because I'd done this sort of anti-Brexit joke, and he'd barrack me during a performance, and he followed me out the door and started ranting at me. And his first words out of his mouth were, "I don't understand why." And I said, "What? Stop you there. If you don't understand, perhaps that's the first reason you shouldn't be talking about it." And just walked away and left him. And that was the funniest thing I'd said all day.
I see. I prefer comedy that makes me go, ooh, then laugh. Some of the comedians I watch, and I just think it makes, like, sometimes I put comments on Facebook and then delete them before I post them because I'm like, no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So Graham's very sort of my sort of, like, the stuff he comes out with.
Graham Rainey, you mean?
Yeah.
I've just been talking to him and I just couldn't do his stuff. I think it's hugely funny, but there's no way I could do it. I just couldn't.
The difference between, so when Life Experience started, all my posts on Facebook completely changed because of the director of Life Experience. And you're just sort of like, so now it's time to be an adult. But so the Madeleine McCann thing was more about how blasé her parents are about what they did, not about making fun of a little girl that was killed by her parents. Or whatever people think actually happened that day.
Yeah.
But I used to sort of share things, but now people still tag me and stuff. I've had to change my Facebook so it messages me. Is it okay to post this?
Yeah.
But yeah, I still get.
I don't. Again, I've had this conversation with Graham. I actually, this is going to sound terribly pious, but I actually on Facebook and Twitter, like yourself, I've typed a lot of stuff out and not posted it. Yeah. I actually say to myself, would I be happy to have this read out in church? And if the answer's no, I don't post it. And I'm pretty much the same. I have written blue humour and given those gags to Graham before now. I'm not sure if he's used them or not, but I've come up with something and I thought, that kills me, that's really funny, but there's no way on God's earth I can do that on stage. So I've just rung him up and said, do you like this? If you like it, you can have it. You know, I can't do it, you know.
No, it's changed me a little bit. I mean, everything. So even now, like, I live my life. Would I still do it if my mum was with me? That's the way I live my life now. So I mean, not 100% of the time. If I'm in a school talking to young people, and 100% of the time, that's how I live my life. But things like if I'm on the bike and there's a car behind me with my mum in it, and the lights in front of me are changing from green to amber, I'm not going to nail it to get through before it goes red because my mum's in the car behind. So I should treat riding the bike that way all the time rather than just if she was behind me. So yeah, I do try to live my life that way. So one last thing, how different do you think your life would be if you was never, if your head didn't work that way and you never became an addict or you never, became an alcoholic or whatever it is?
I think I'd have really shit, boring stories to tell at parties. I don't know. I'm not glad that I've been through everything that I've been through because it has been a trauma. But you wouldn't be who you are now, would you? If you want,
No, absolutely.
And I'd much rather be the person I am now than what I might have turned out as if I hadn't gone through all that crap.
No. Sorry, go on.
There's a lot. We've gained a lot of experience, haven't we? It might have took a long time to sink in the knowledge, but it is there, isn't it? And you've got that knowledge, which I don't think I would have had. Or maybe I don't think I'd have been half as understanding as what I am. I might have been a lot more blinkered and small-minded, I think.
I always think it's a bit like the best footballers don't make the best coaches because they don't understand what makes them so good. They've always been that good. They've always been exceptional. It's just natural to them. Why can't other people do it? I've heard a story once about Glenn Hoddle trying to get David Beckham, who wasn't, as technically gifted as him, to do a particular thing. And Beckham tried it a couple of times and couldn't. You're obviously not good enough for that. You can't do that. And you think, all that Beckham's achieved, But technically, on a technical level, he wasn't as good as Glenn Hoddle. He probably achieved more with his gifts. But the fact is that Hoddle didn't get why he couldn't do it. And I think an oblique way of saying that, because I recovered quite late in life, I've got a bit more self-awareness about me, I think. You know, having come from there, I know how much better I feel now, is what I'm saying. Whereas if it had always been normal, I wouldn't know what it took to get me here.
Yeah.
But now I know the work I've put in. Does that make any sort of sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course it does. I mean, before I started taking drugs, so if I would never have taken drugs, I was 20-year-old. I was an area manager of a security company. So I was going around West Yorkshire in a suit. I would have had a company car if I had a driver's license. So my life would have probably, you know, I'd have passed my driving test. I don't know where I'd be within that company or that industry at the moment, but I'd probably have a really nice house and a really nice car, because it was a hell of a lot of money for a 20-year-old at that time. We're talking 16 years ago now. And I would never have stood on stage and performed poetry. I would never have stood in a school in front of a class talking about choices and consequences. I would never have done a one-to-one with a young person and sort of tried to change their perspective on life. All the things that I'm doing now, and all the things. So them 10 years were horrible. Don't get me wrong. It was a terrible sort of 10 years of just madness and putting all my family and my friends through absolute shit. But the 6 years it's been since, and the rest of the years to come, are going to be massively better than they ever would have been if it wasn't for those 10 years.
Yeah.
So whilst it was sort of a terrible thing to go through, my head would always have been the same. So if it wasn't drugs, it might have been gambling. It could have been, you know, sex. It could have been absolutely anything, but it would have been something. So in a way, I'm glad it's weird to say I'm glad it was only drugs, because that's the easiest one to identify there's a problem. You know, with alcohol, it's a social thing to do.
You can hide it pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, and with drugs, I made it a social thing to do. I stopped hanging around with people that didn't take drugs, or there were friends who were sort of curious, who came along and tried drugs with me, and then I'm the one who's got them sort of using, and that sort of, there was no guilt there at the time, because it was just somebody else to come and spend time with. So I just isolated myself around people who did the same things, who thought it was okay to drive a car without a license while sniffing ketamine. Stupid.
Yes, you curate your friendship group so it becomes normal, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the friends were customers, and it was, I'll go to their house and we'll start sniffing coke, and I know as soon as they've had a bit, they'll want to buy some. You know, it was that sort of deceitful way of trying to get, not necessarily money, because I never really made money. I just got free drugs. But once they buy one, they're going to give me a line back, and I don't have to keep sniffing all mine. And it was just that what's in it for me mentality.
Yeah.
It's made me sort of, I think you probably speak to some people and say, no, he's still the same knobhead he was. Like, you know, I'm a better person for it. You know, all the work I'm doing, I wouldn't have been doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. There's no doubt about that. I'd still be selling bloody bike parts and car parts and stuff, and really...
Sounds dodgy.
Well, it doesn't do it for me. I was deeply unhappy when I was doing that stuff. Not because it's a Mac job, isn't it? No disrespect to people who work in Mackie D's, you know, but it wasn't doing it for me. Just doing it for the money doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's one of them, isn't it?
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for being my first video. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This will be on YouTube and on a podcast as well, so I'm going to separate the audio and put it on there. If you've got anything nice to say, leave comments. If you're just going to be divs about anything we've spoken about, don't comment. And the other thing is, we've spoke a bit about our own personal journeys. We're not saying that the best way to be in recovery is to do one of the things we've said, because as addicts, one of the things that we're good at is, oh, I don't have to do that because he's okay and he didn't do that. Or people just pick and choose the bits that suit them. Everyone's recovery is different. Things don't work for everybody. Like I say, I don't go to meetings, but I'm really lucky that I had a really, really intense recovery experience in prison. which has sort of helped shaped the way I'm in recovery. So don't be picking and choosing the bits you want and going to pubs and then saying, well, Si said I can go in a pub and not drink. He's a bit stronger than me, but I'll try again. It's not how it works. Okay. But genuinely, thank you very much for listening, and thank you too for being involved. And I'll see you later.
Cheers.
See you later.